Hey, what's up, everyone? Um, Now we're going to be in chapter 18, and normally I have my little picture stuck in the bottom somewhere, but today I have strained my neck a little bit, so I'm not going to do that because I have ice on it. So I'm going to just chat with you this way. Real quickly, I will say that I am very pleased to see that some of you have started to complete some of the work. Um, you have a long ways to go, so I hope you can get it all done in a short time because you've really got a little over 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks to finish up everything. So I hope that you will be responsible and get your work done. I'm not going to lose any more sleep over it. I've suggested multiple times to you guys to handle your business. So now it's time for you to handle your business. So as I say, you earn the grade you get. So hopefully you will step it up a bit and finish strong. Okay. So knowing this, so we're in chapter 18. We've only got another chapter left, and then we're done, or a couple chapters left, and we're done. So this chapter is on climate change, and it's interesting when people think of climate change. They used to use the word global warming, but the problem with that was every time you said global warming, people would say, well, how come it's getting colder here? The weather was more rainy or more, snowy or, more extreme now than before. So what is it? I know, what is it? How come it's not everywhere is not getting hotter? Well, global warming doesn't, by the virtue of the fact that the earth is warming up, doesn't means that the ecosystem is changing as a result. So when things warm up, there is a causal effect, a cause and effect rather, that causes the instability that could cause other areas to get colder, other areas to get warmer. So they stopped using the term global warming and started using the word climate change, just so they wouldn't confuse people and people would stop tripping. And believe me, they were tripping. Um, So what does it mean when we talk about in the context of global warming, right? And what we're really talking about is the fact that the Earth, as I said earlier, is warming up. In fact, in 2014-15, they had the warmest temperatures ever recorded on planet Earth in modern history. So it's really, it's a concern. And I can recall just every summer I lecture at Oxford, England, up until a couple of years ago. And when I would fly back and fly over, you fly over the North Pole. And I happened to notice the last time I flew back that when I was flying south and you fly over the North Pole, you fly south toward over Greenland. And it was, the time of year when it's naturally all white, everything is covered in snow. Well, when you look down out of the window of the airplane, there was a lot of dirt and a little bit of green where Greenland is. And I kept thinking, that's not supposed to be like that. And certainly, that was a problem. In fact, it was such a problem that I did a podcast on it several years ago about the issue of global warming. Um, and ironically, it's interesting. In fact, if I hope by the time that you watch this lecture that you will have watched some of the videos from this week. And of course, this week you have a discussion, not your usual write up. To discuss some of the issues relevant to global warming or climate change. And so it's really important because you'll see one that was the one on Vice, HBO Vice, about just how catastrophic this effect has been in Antarctica as well as the North Pole and other areas, and what happens as the water levels rise and what that does to coastal areas. And there's a huge amount of impact that it has that people typically don't realize. Uh, so when you talk about the idea of global warming, we're really talking about two aspects that really impact this. One is carbon dioxide or CO2, and the other one is methane, which is CH4. And combined, they call them greenhouse gases. And what these do is they actually trap heat inside the atmosphere so it can't escape. And so that's why the Earth is heating up. And a lot of this is caused by humans. In history, of course, naturally human beings produce methane as well. If you go to the bathroom or if you have, pass gas or something, then that's methane as well. Interestingly enough, cows, one of the big issues they have with cows, and cows consume grass, and they have a lot of gas, and now they're finding out that even that causes a problem. So it's more than just humans. It's a lot of the things that we feed our animals and things that cause methane to increase. Um, but so the CO2 and CH4 are both increasing dramatically, which causes the global temperatures to rise. Uh, Again, as I said, there's all different reasons and different aspects that we talk about when we talk about CO2. So obviously, we're talking about fossil fuels, wood, gas, all those things, manufacturing technology, all those things have a direct impact on greenhouse gases and the increase of greenhouse gases. Just like with methane, you can see below here on the PowerPoint where it talks about when they burn vegetation, like if you, in fact, in farm fields, like out here in the Imperial Valley, when they get through harvesting, sometimes they'll burn off the excess, and so all those things cause greenhouse gas effects as well. Um, okay, so of course, the immediate impact is, of course, the ice caps are melting at a frantic pace, which is incredibly alarming, which you'll see in the Vice video. The sea levels are rising, the really extreme weathers, of course, as you can see here, flooding, droughts, all these things are a direct byproduct of what's happening and how the planet is heating up, uh, and the causality and effects of the heat. So when you talk about who produces it, who are the major producers of CO2, China, U.S. are the two major ones. China particularly, and that's a huge problem. And you'll find when we talk later on that not only do these have environmental impacts, they have economic impacts, they have political impacts. They even can come to security issues and wars. Because here's the question that you have to ask yourself. Let's say, for example, in the rainforest in Brazil, which is getting mowed over, thousands of acres every day, that they killed the rainforest, which is causing a huge hole in the ozone down there. But their hole in the ozone over Brazil has a catastrophic effect globally. And so the question is, which is a tough question, do other countries have the right to intervene, even if Brazil won't do the right thing? And this is where it gets messy when if a country is going to kill the planet by virtue of what they do or utilization of fossil fuels, then do other countries who are trying to do it right have the right to go in and say, no, we're not going to let you do this. We're going to stop this whatever way we have to. So that's where it gets to be murky and messy. But you can see here basically that Russia, China, EU are the primary. Then, of course, there's a few other folks below them. Then again, when you see the 31.5%, that's a significant number, but that's spread out over, probably 30 or 40 countries. So that's why the number looks like a big number, but it's smaller in percentage per country. And we talk about the geographical aspects. So the idea of what happens when you have climate change, or when you have warming, of course, sea level rises, as I've said, and this has impacts from San Diego to New York to Florida to any coastal areas. Could have serious ramifications, where some of these areas could be either they'd have to find a way to resolve that, build or find ways to remove the water or keep the level so that the cities don't go underwater. So it's a big deal. And then you have poor countries like Bangladesh where, literally the result could be even more catastrophic because they don't have the technology or innovation to be able to deal with an issue as serious as this is. Uh, of course, we're also talking about the lack of potable water. And whether you know this or not, the amount of potable water on the planet is decreasing rapidly. And potable water means water that's able to drink. And so the only way you can get that from salt water is that you have to use desalination plants. And so, but what happens is the salt water starts to spread, and so then it gets into waterways and areas that we normally would have fresh water that now will be inundated with salt water. Um, then, of course, you have to deal with the flooding aspect too, which is one of the more serious problems that can cause malaria. Humidity goes up, so mosquitoes go crazy, and so the whole thing is a serious environmental crisis. Now, from the historical context, obviously we have to, we assess this by looking at historical data and tracking the temperatures, for example, for the last 3, 4, 500 years. They can run computer models that will dictate exactly, what the weather was in certain periods of time going back, thousands of years. So we can see how fast or the way the Earth is changing environmentally. Based on the historical data that we can assess. So this is it's a big undertaking, but the data is there to prove this. That's why when you see again on the political side of things, which we'll talk about in a minute, how you have some people who are what we call climate deniers, who don't believe that the climate is changing, and it's unfortunate. Sadly, people are so foolish because sometimes if they don't see it directly in their face every second, they don't believe it's happening because it's not in the paper every day, so they don't believe it's happening, and they don't realize that it happens whether they're watching or not. It's like when you breathe air, you can't see the stuff in the air that's bad for you, but you still breathe it, and it still can be, especially out here in Imperial Valley where the air is pretty toxic during part of the year. And so you can't see the bad air, but you certainly breathe it in all the time. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. Now, when we talk about it in terms of anthropology, again, it's really about how people's lives are affected by this, right? How are people challenged by the climate change? Well, of course, can certainly increase, sociologically speaking and anthropologically speaking, it can increase stress. Uh, you have to figure out, countries have to figure out how to adapt and change with the way they normally have been, conducting business that may be impacting climate change to accommodate what may need to happen going forward. That's why even in the United States, when you talk about technology and innovation, that we put in place and stiff requirements on certain industries that are known for causing these types of gas effects, and then people get all upset because it may require changing your job, or people who work in those industries, and yet if we don't do that, the consequences are worse. And yet people still will still deny because they're like, well, that's not for us to worry about. That could happen 100 years from now, and it's like, so what about your kids, your great great grandkids? You don't care about the world you're going to leave for them? Because remember, I always say it's not about you. It's not just about you. It's about the people around you who it also affects. Um, so, again, there are certain states that are doing it better, that are ahead on these things, and certain states that are not good on this. California is pretty good on environmental things like this. Like with our gas and stuff, we try to put things in effect to try and deal with these things. And I can tell you, when I was a kid growing up, and we would fly into Los Angeles or drive to LA back in the day, I mean, when my aunt lived in San Fernando Valley, it was just like brown skies, and the air stunk. It was so bad. And literally by just putting in smog restrictions and changing how engines are built in terms of smog control devices and things they put on cars and cleaner fuels, in a matter of 15 to 20 years, LA air is so much cleaner than it was. I mean, substantially cleaner than it ever was. So it's pretty amazing that just the little things we can do that can have huge effects. The other things also do with things like transportation and things like that too, being more innovative. The fact that we don't have high-speed railways that can be environmentally friendly, and also have a less reluctance, or less reliance, I should say, on automobiles, right? And then, of course, the economic impact, of course, is billions of dollars. And I mean, when we talk about the idea of looking at alternative energy sources, one of the biggest problems we have with that is the fact that those traditional companies that still hold the old ideas like coal burning, right, or the old ways of manufacturing, um, those folks who do not control the new technologies that are new innovations will do everything they can by using the political system to try and block new ideas or innovations from coming forward. And when you have a multi-billion-dollar industry like the gas industry, well, of course they don't want electric cars because they don't control the companies who are creating electricity, so the electric cars. So therefore, their push is to try and keep you in gasoline vehicles until or unless they can control the avenue for change. So, for example, Chevron or Shell or any or Mobil or Arco, they don't want to see electric cars because they don't control the technology for electric cars. For I won't say refueling, for charging electric cars. So without having that innovation or being able to control that, they lose billions of dollars. So there's a impetus for them to try and keep it the way they keep it. Um, Also, of course, you can see the ways they've talked about, for example, how like along the coastal areas, the cost of having to, build seawalls or find innovative ways to protect against, some of the crises that are now happening as a result of the heating up of the planet. Uh, and then again, so a lot of these ideas have to be put in place, but they're not free. And and doing it at a global level, we're talking trillions of dollars to try and stem off the tide of what could happen. And Mother Earth is a pretty special place, and it has a great way of healing itself, even from humans and how much humans have done damage to it. But you can take too much away from her, and then perhaps she may not be able to heal herself. And then all the things we talk about in school will not matter because we won't be here. And it would be a shame if we were the cause of our own demise. As I said, politically, on a global level, there's been multiple things that we've tried to do to try and stem the tide of climate change. There've been multiple negotiations. There's been, United Nations panels. There's been conventions. They've written protocols, like in Kyoto in 1997, the Paris Accords in 2015, when they really tried to deal with the issue of climate change, and the two largest emitters of climate change, as I mentioned before, the U.S. and China. Uh, and we all agreed, to limit the greenhouse gases and try and get our act together. And then in 2017, Trump decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. And then just recently, Biden jumped back in. And personally, I think it's a good thing. I'm not going there on the issue of Trump, but I'm just simply saying in terms of the U.S. responsibility and leading the way on trying to protect the planet should be a no-brainer. So hopefully we will learn to protect ourselves and protect not just the United States, but also what that does and means for the rest of the world. Okay. So with that, there's some questions that you have to answer regarding this issue that I have posed for your discussion for this week, which is your assignment for this week. And I hope you give us some due diligence. I will be, I want you to watch those videos and go through the chapter, which is a very short chapter, and just really I want to know what you think. Most of the discussions, the real basis of questioning is really, what do you think? And I'm looking for, a good couple of solid paragraphs and good responses to each of the questions that are posed by either that you're answering or that you're writing by your classmates. So I'm looking forward to reading those, and that's it. Okay, we had a short one this week, so I will see you in the next one. You guys have a great day.